Good morning again, friends, or good afternoon, whenever you're hearing this. This is Philip Amerson with the Belonging Exchange. This is the To Be and Do podcast. And today we are thrilled to interview a dear friend and a remarkable leader, Jerre Stead. Jerre, I could go on and on about how many corporate boards you've served on. I think it's almost 40 now. And how many capital campaigns you've led and your CEO work with so many important organizations, corporations. But we're most interested in just chatting with you today about leadership and about building teams and community. So, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
It's a great pleasure, Phil. I'm happy to be with you always.
Well, uh, now, full disclosure, Jerre and I worked together at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. He was a board chair there with me, the best darn board chair I've ever worked with. And one of the things I thought would be interesting to start with, Jerre, one of the things I've noticed you have wonderful skill at doing is one, helping people set goals, and two, then encouraging them to work together on those goals. And I've seen you do that in smaller organizations, but also in some pretty large ones. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to, Phil. What over the years, I'm so blessed to have had such great people to partner with, like you, and all the progress, the wonderful things we did together at Garrett. But what I set up over large corporations, I led 10 public companies over 47 years. And the largest one with headcount anyway was NCR. And we were headquartered in Dayton, Ohio, 120,000 people around the world. And I'll use that one only as an example because I always did the same thing, no matter what the size. But I always reached out to the future and said, what do we have to accomplish 4 to 5 years from now? And I would set, as you know, and we did it together, quite aggressive goals. Because I always believed if you didn't stretch the rubber band of change, you'd never know how far you could have gone. It's funny, Phil, you'll remember people said, well, did you ever break the rubber band? And I said, yeah,
Yeah,
of course. It's the only way you find out. If you didn't do that, you'd never know how great you could have been. So
right.
we'd set very aggressive goals and then work backwards from there and make sure that the present time we were in, each of our teammates and teams had 3 or up to 5 goals. That was it, never more. And they were always around what we called the virtuous circle, which started with colleague, employee, if you will, colleague engagement. And I'll come back to that. And then second was customer delight. And then third was profitable top line and bottom line growth. And fourth was shareowner return. And fifth was personal development. So we'd set goals that every person bottom up, not top down, bottom up would have measurable goals. Uh, and I always talked about actionable facts that we could use to help people make the decisions that they needed to make, hold them accountable. Because I always operated, as you know, Phil, I assumed every person I ever met wanted to be successful because I believe that's true. And so the more you can create an environment with the goals to help each one be allowed to be accountable. I always talked about the 3 P's: power, permission, and protection for every person and every team. So they had the ability to set the goals that went bottom up and then top down together and be measurable daily, weekly, quarterly, and annually. And it was fun, like I said, with those 4 things. But everything started, and by the way, that's true whether it's for profit, nonprofit, it's all the same. Everything starts with colleague engagement. I always ran 2 to 3 surveys a year with all of my colleagues, anonymous, short, 15 questions, including open opportunities to write in their thoughts. I would read every one of the comments they ever sent because that helped me understand what we were doing, how the measurable goals were working, and perhaps most important, how they were feeling about, because the open questions were, how are we doing? What things should we stop doing? And what things aren't we doing? We should start doing. So they always got that constant feedback because goals are critical. And like I said, always stretch them because it's okay to miss a goal if we've done your very best. Stretch them, but always make sure that they were measurable against an overall performance.
So you've just offered a graduate course in management. That was terrific. Power, permission, and protection. What you offered sounds like it's mathematical and technical, but you also are a person of faith. And I think that's behind a lot of this as well, isn't it?
No question. I always, every company, for profit or nonprofit, that I was involved supporting or leading, I always started with a single thing, Phil, which was treat every person with equal dignity and respect. Treat every person with equal dignity and respect. That was my way of using the Bible's golden rule for everybody. Because no organization will be effective and no organization will be as great as they could be if they don't start with that. The second thing I always used on that same theme was operated with 100% trust of every person. So think about, we're going to treat everybody with equal dignity and respect, and we're going to operate with 100% trust for each other. And that creates a culture that is right out of faith based, but it makes it so that people can understand, no matter what their beliefs are, that they can understand how we're going to operate. And I would be very visible with treating every person with equal dignity and respect. One of the things I've watched over the years, and I used to just shake my head, was we would have, I did not believe in perks, never have, because that creates a we they structure that nobody wants. You want to treat everybody top down, bottom up with equal dignity and respect. So every company I moved into and every nonprofit I moved into, we got rid of perks
Yep.
because that's just not okay. And you'll remember that because that's the way an organization has to operate. An example that I would set in my case, always did it. I never had a contract, I never had an agreement. If people that worked in my organizations wanted one, I'd do that for their own benefit. But I wanted to show the example that I was never going to do anything. I would never ask them to do anything that I wasn't doing. And
Yeah.
the power, permission, and protection was so important. And it's interesting because over all the years, once you get that in place, the treat every person with equal dignity and respect, operate with 100% trust. I can talk more about that in a minute, but then make sure everybody's got measurable goals they can have fun and succeed with, but give them the power, permission, and protection to make those goals happen. You can change a culture quick. I had 120,000 people when I first got to NCR, and we improved that culture, which was 120 years old at the time, which is always interesting. We improved it a ton, and it had been a wonderful history. But over the years, the bigger organizations get, the more they get caught in a bureaucracy. And with those simple rules that you and I just talked about, guidelines, we changed the whole culture.
So some theologians would parallel what you just said is a movement from contract to covenant.
Yes, yeah.
movement from we're going to write it all down and hold you accountable to we're going to expect the best of one another
Yep. And we're going to trust that you're going to do it.
and we're going to trust.
You
Yeah.
may remember, Phil, when I took over at Square D, that was the second company I was CEO of. Uh, I got their wonderful 85-year-old company. I'd been there the second day. A young guy brought in the two books of policies and procedures, a blue one and I think it was a gray one for marketing and sales, one for manufacturing and R&D. There was like 400, 600 of them. And he said, I can still remember, he's a good guy. We laughed together later. He said, "You're CEO, you're the only one that gets all of them." I burned them in the parking lot, uh, which is a little bit dramatic, but I wanted to prove the point that we don't need these. Exactly what you said is what we need. Then what we did, and I'll tell you a funny story about that in just a second, but what we did was then I assigned uh, groupings to, like, Tom Benley, my wonderful CFO. What were the three or four things we did need as guidelines? For example, approval levels and tools. Every one of those policies and procedures had to be tools instead of weapons, tools to help our people be successful. So that's the change we made. And again, you can do it quickly. What I had not expected uh, was when I was proving my point at corporate headquarters, burning it in the parking lot, people took photos of it, and I ended up on the cover of Business Week in 1987. Uh, and I must tell you, I had a new board. I was new. The board had been there for years. That first board meeting was pretty funny because they were, I was 42, I think. They were a wonderful group of executives, but a bit older. And I can still remember Frank Morgan, who was the president and CEO of a great Chicago based company, Quaker Oats. Uh, and Frank sat down in the meeting a little bit ahead of time, and he'd been on the selection committee that had picked me and got me to come. He said, "Well, you certainly started your leadership thing with a bang." And I said, "No, it wasn't a bang; it was a fire." So
Well, tools instead of weapons. Thank you, Jerry. This is the first of a couple of conversations we're going to have with Jerre Stead. And in the next one, I'm going to ask him to share some object or thought or memory that he considers a sacred relic or artifact. So thank you, Jerre Stead. And we encourage our listeners to look him up. He's helped author some books, and you'll be blessed not only by his wisdom as a manager, but his grace as a Christian. Thank you, Jerre Stead.
thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure to be doing this with you.